Hello everybody, thank you so much for stopping by. I am ChitChad and welcome once again to another animation video here on the channel. I am so excited because we are continuing the trend from Tuesday's video and we're working on animations for the Mario theme park, specifically the Yoshi Coaster that I'm building over on my gaming channel. But this time, we're not just making an animation with one Yoshi, we're making an animation with a whole herd of Yoshis. So we're going to be jumping around between Adobe Animate and Adobe After Effects. There's a lot of work to do and I'm really excited for it, so let's go ahead and jump into the time-lapse. Alright, so jumping into the time-lapse, I went ahead and grabbed a sprite sheet, I believe from Super Mario World, of Yoshi. And basically what I'm using this for is reference for his particular walk slash run cycle. Well, he has a couple of different cycles from different games, and I didn't want one where he was just kind of like booking it, where he was just heading like straight, where his head's like really tilting forward and like his whole body is moving into it. I wanted something that was kind of between a walk and a run, so it's more like a stride really. So before we do that, we actually have to build a character model to actually animate, and just like the video before, gosh darn it, do I have a hard time drawing Yoshi's face. Like, it just doesn't compute in my brain. He has like goggle eyes and he doesn't have a skull behind his eyes. It's just like his eyes are fitted on top of a nose, and for whatever reason I just can't draw it. So I had to like look at multiple resources to try and figure it out, and I think the one that I actually ended up using the most was his like cutout version. I think it was from Paper Mario. At least the image that I found kind of looks like Paper Mario, so I'm gonna assume that's where it's from because the style was very similar. And that helped me out a lot. So you'll see me messing with Yoshi's eyes a considerable amount, but I also jump around a little bit more than usual once again in this episode, just because I have so much work that I had to get done just for this episode. This was about like a solid day's worth of work of just animating and creating character models. So I should probably explain the concept of character models a bit more. So in Adobe Animate, you know, there's multiple ways you can animate things. You can be more of like a traditionalist and do it all frame by frame, or you can do something that's called tweening. So tweening is taking an object and moving it from one position to another, and then having Flash/Animate figure out the difference for you. So old school method would be to do, you know, one key pose to another key pose, and then you do the breakdowns of that, and then you do the in-betweens of that. So first you would do the two main poses, so from one major position to another major position, then you would do the position in between, and then from there you would have to do the in-betweens of those in-betweens. So it's a lot of work. I applaud like traditional animators because people don't realize like a second worth of animation could be like an entire day's worth of work, if not more. So I'm not able to do that specifically if I'm going to get animation out for this channel. So we are going to be doing the tweening method. And so what you have to kind of do is build a character model in order for that to work. So a character model, you almost think of them as like a marionette or a puppet, whatever you want to call it. And each section that you want to be able to move independently has to be its own object. So that's why you kind of see me making this in sections, you know, and you also see me jump around to my secret character model sheet for my animated series, Benny and Fran, to use some of the assets that I've already created, because I don't like drawing hands, and I had to draw a lot of them for Benny and Francis. So I jump over to those character sheets and grab I'm using Francis's hands specifically because he's also a green character, so I thought that would be fitting. So once again, you'll see me try and draw those eyes, pulling them from the sprite sheet, and I didn't like that, and I was just like, you know what, I almost was just like, I'm giving up on these eyes and they're just gonna be what they are. But the final look of them I actually think works pretty well. So as far as character models are concerned, like I said, you have to have individual pieces and they have to be their own graphics. So inside of Flash, this is where it gets kind of complicated. So inside of Flash, you can have just normal drawing objects, which you just once you have some raw artwork that you want to protect, you can press Control or Command, depending on if you're a PC or Mac. You can press Control or Command G to group that object, and now that object is kind of put into a folder, and if you double click on that object, you can go inside of that folder and then edit it once again. So that's a good way while you're drawing to kind of be like, all right, that part of it's done, I want to protect it, right? So if you want to break it apart and put it back into the raw artwork format, you would just press Control or Command B to break. So once I kind of got the whole thing down, once I had all the pieces the way I wanted them, then I had to convert each individual piece into a graphic. Now, there are 3 different types of, I don't want to call them animatable objects, but there's 3 types of symbols. There's movie clips, graphics, and buttons. Mostly I use graphics because graphics allow you to embed multiples inside of each other but still be able to see the animation regardless of what layer into the folder structure you're on. Movie clips is almost like a self-contained movie all on its own, so I use graphics. So once you convert everything into a graphic, then you have to go in, and when you select each of those individual pieces, I believe you press Q, and Q is going to bring up the transition, the rotation tool, and then from there you can select the anchor point. And the anchor point's kind of like the pseudo-skeletal structure of your character. So once you get all that worked out, then you can actually get into the animation process, which I'm doing right now. And as you can see, I'm using that Yoshi sprite sheet as a reference for Yoshi's walk cycle. The first thing that I wanted to do was get the foot placement right, because Yoshi's kind of he's a bit of a stunted character. He's got really short legs, and in fact, the sprite sheet doesn't even use legs. For the most part, it looks like they just use shoes to kind of dictate, you know, how his feet are moving. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to actually give Yoshi legs. So the first thing I wanted to do was get how his feet are planting, how his legs are moving right. And then from there, then we go back and do the arm swing. And because I only see one arm in this Yoshi sprite, I kind of had to just use my own animation knowledge to kind of fill in the gaps. So again, that was used as a reference. I knew it wasn't going to be, you know, just exactly 1-to-1, but I was hoping it would be a little bit more accurate. But because I've done walk cycles in the past, I figured it out, and you'll actually see that I've used a red line to kind of guide me where I'm going. I would also say that his arm swing isn't always going in the right place in the sprite sheet. Sometimes it's moving forward. So basically, whatever leg is on the same side as the arm, you want them to be opposite of each other. So if your leg is moving back, you want your arm to be moving forward and vice versa. In the sprite sheet, it looks like sometimes it's doing the opposite, but it's kind of hard to tell. It's kind of hard to tell which foot is which on the sprite sheet because they both kind of seem like they occupy the same space, almost like it's on a flat plane. Kind of like Mickey Mouse's ears. No matter where Mickey turns, his ears are always in the same position. It's kind of like that with Yoshi's feet. I'm like, they look like they're occupying the same space and there's no Z depth to it. But because it's a sprite, you know, they kind of get away with it and it still looks really, really good. But not so much when we're doing this kind of character animation. So I had to be a bit more specific. So once we get the arm swing down, then what I'm going to do is go in and add a bounciness to Yoshi's stride, because when you look at a lot of animation books, particularly The Illusion of Life, which is a really good one. It's from 2 of the Disney animators, Frank and Ollie, I believe were their names. It's a really good book. It's got like a walk cycle of Pinocchio on the front. It's a really good resource if you're trying to figure out animation as just far as character-driven animation, and it goes through all of the core concepts, you know, follow through, squash and stretch, secondary animation, all that stuff. If that's something you're really interested in, I highly recommend checking out that book. It helped me a lot when I was first in art and animation school, and I probably couldn't have figured anything out without that book. So it is the go-to. It is the animation Bible, I would say. It's good stuff. And you see this in a lot of animations or a lot of television shows even now. For instance, I've seen this a couple times in Family Guy, where Peter's mouth moves so extremely that it actually breaks the boundaries of his face. So you'll actually see where the line art stops and it's just the interior color of his skin. So that's kind of what happened with Yoshi's leg. It moved to the point where the line art no longer matched with it. So I always make another layer above all the rest, and then just start filling in those gaps with just drawing line by line by line by keyframe by frame, or yeah, by keyframe by keyframe by keyframe to fix those little errors. And a lot of times you won't notice it, particularly on something like this where it's just like a walk cycle, but for me, I just wanted to give it that little extra layer of polish. So one of the things I had to do was add a blink to Yoshi, just like I did for the previous animated video, just because I didn't want him to have like that dead stare. So basically, he goes through his walk cycle twice, but blinks once. So that's why I duplicated the frames, just so I can have him blink once between 2 cycles, so it didn't look like he was just blinking like a crazy person. So I think it helped make it a bit more natural. And I really like how this walk cycle turned out. It was so much fun. And like I've said, like I really want to get back into doing animation a lot more often. It's just it takes a lot of time to do. But it's a lot of fun and it's super rewarding once you're done. So now we are creating all of the alternative Yoshis, all the different color Yoshis, and because I said before in the previous video that we're gonna have like one Yoshi kind of like walk out and kind of like be like hello, and then we're gonna have a herd of all the other Yoshis kind of go by him while he's doing that. So now that we have the herd, we need to make the Yoshi that says hello. So this part's a little bit tricky because we've got to take him from a walk cycle to a standing pose, do kind of this gesture, and then go from that gesture back into the walk cycle. So this part was a little tricky, and I used a thing called onion skins. Now, onion skins is much like if you were doing animation, you would use a light table, and a light table basically shines through all your papers so you can see all the different poses and then draw the in-between of those poses. Onion skinning is very similar to that, or it's basically the same concept as that. So it allows you to see the layers before or after the one that you're working on. You can extend it out to see as many layers as you want, but it starts getting confusing the more and more you expand out the onion skinning view. So I recommend just leaving it to a couple of frames or else you're gonna really confuse yourself. So this is where we're gonna employ a lot of squash and stretch for Yoshi, and I use squash and stretch a lot to kind of hide the transitions between one object to another or one pose to another. And I use that in particular because like I said, we're moving from a walking pose to a standing pose, and then from the gesturing pose back into the walking pose. So we kind of need to transition them in from each of those states of movement. And that would be really tricky if you just had it perfectly still with only subtle movement, because you would sort of see that transition, especially because he's going from momentum to zero momentum. So the squash and stretch kind of hides the transition between that level of momentum. And of course, I'm giving him once again that kind of like that very Mickey Mouse pose, like hello type thing. I wanted to kind of emulate the pose that you saw in the posters that we created for the ride, just so it's a little bit of a callback and we keep things consistent. And then of course I had to have him smile a little bit, you know, get his nice little Yoshi smile going, and just adding like those little bit of details. This was so much fun. I know I've said that so many times, but I love doing this. This was so much fun to work on. So what I had to do here was, once we had all those extra pieces on different layers, I had to also convert those into graphics so that they could be animated, because I wanted the mouth to not just appear but have a little bit of an in-between from when his mouth is closed to when his mouth opens, so it's not just like it appears. The hand is not such a big deal because you can move your hand so fast that just switching it from the closed hand to the open hand, I don't think it was as big of a deal because you don't really notice that transition. But most of the time we're looking at characters' faces. So for character faces, I always want to put in just a little bit more detail, whether it's adding more layers to the blink and not just having it just be one frame worth of animation, or it's the mouth movements. I always try and give it just that little extra detail because you're always looking at the character's face. So most of the other things you can kind of get away with if you have the character face looking just right. And there you have it. We've got Yoshi going from a walk to a pose to another walk, and it was a lot of fun, man, but it was a little complicated at first. So now we're jumping into After Effects, where we're going to be putting this all together. So once I exported all of these animations into transparent files so that they don't have a background, I brought those into After Effects, where we're going to be doing a bit more work to them. We're going to be adding a bit of extra stroke weight to them so that they kind of pop from the background. We're going to be adding an animated background, which I created a background that was fairly similar to the one that we did for the previous Yoshi animation, just again to keep it consistent and similar to each other. And what I decided to do was I kept Yoshi's timing, the green Yoshi's timing, the same, but I took the walk cycles, the run cycles, whatever we're calling them, I took those cycles and I sped them up just a little bit to make it seem like they were moving just a bit faster. And then from there, I just kind of changed the timing on them, moved the layers around a little bit so it didn't look like they were all stepping at the exact same time. Otherwise, it would look like an obvious reuse of the cycle. But because we staggered them, it makes it look like they're all kind of doing their own thing. And in fact, fact, I think I even like changed the timing on some of them versus others, so I made the timing stretch more extreme or less extreme. So now not only do we have a timing difference in regards to when they start moving, but we also have a timing difference in how long it takes for them to complete their cycle. And it's really nice because in After Effects, if you only did like a really short cycle, you can actually go in and tell the footage to repeat. So you don't have to like copy and paste the same layer and like move it over. No, you can just go into the actual project, look at the file that you want to have repeat, and I think it's under the properties, and then you can just tell it to repeat the frames. So that's super helpful if you want to like keep it consistent and be able to use short cycles over and over and over again so they just keep repeating themselves. Alright, so we're coming down to the end of this video, so we are going to stop the time lapse and move into the final render of this animation.
Yoshi! Yoshi!
Alright, so that's the final animation for the first Yoshi encounter on the Yoshi Coaster that I'm building over on my gaming channel. This was a lot of fun to make. It's been a while since I've had to do a walk and a run cycle, so that was a lot of fun, and just having a whole herd of Yoshis. Whoa, hey, come on guys, I'm trying to make a video here. This is ridiculous. Where's Mario? Where's Luigi? Come on, guys. Anyways, this was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see how this animation is going to be incorporated into the park that I'm building, go check out my gaming channel on Friday for the video. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you're having an amazing day. Go out there, be creative, and as always, I will chat with you later.